Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Kristie Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Hi, Kristie.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I am still sleepy. I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure if it's allergies or, it's the time of the year. I just have not recovered since the time change. For as crazy as that sounds, I feel like I've not been not tired since then.
Yeah. Well, my kids usually wake up around 6:37. And since we've been back from Colorado, they have been sleeping till about 8. And they're so sludgy in the morning because it's a 2-hour difference. And, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot. So.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Hot.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there are a couple like housekeeping things.
Okay.
So wanting to let everybody know that we have multiple places where you can leave us comments or questions so we can talk about things that are interesting to you or things that you have questions about. So you can go to playtherapyspace.com, or you can leave in the comments of any of the platforms where you listen to the podcast and on YouTube, where we have a video stream of the podcast and you can see what we look like and our funny faces when we talk and all of our hand movements. And then you can also email us. So Maggie at playtherapyspace.com, Kristie at playtherapyspace.com, or info at playtherapyspace.com.
We also have a Facebook page. You can leave stuff on our Facebook page, Play Therapy Space.
And Instagram,
right? So you can leave it on the socials.
And LinkedIn. And I've been told Pinterest is also a place that we should start putting stuff. Yeah. And Kristie and I are also in talks about planning a child-centered play therapy training 101. So that'll be exciting, either in Northern Virginia or North Carolina. So yay.
That will be good.
Yeah. And then I got some good news from APT.
Yes, Maggie won a big award for all of her amazing work.
And I'm very grateful for Kristie and Sarah Herrig and Samantha Long and Michelle Smith and Michelle Walker, who all supported this. And I had no idea it was happening.
I surprised her.
Yeah, it was the best surprise. I was like, wait, what? Because I was actually going to nominate Kristie for this award. And the due date got past me. And I'm like, oh, dang it. I missed it. And then I got the email and I was like, oh, maybe they want me to nominate Kristie. So It's very exciting. And I thought it was really cool when looking at the awards. So E Chen also got the service award. And then Jenna Taylor got the dissertation award, right? Mm-hmm. And then there were 2 research awards. One went to Dr. Kristie Perryman, but I can't remember who got the other one.
And Caitlin Frawley.
And so it's kind of neat because almost everybody has some connection to UNT.
As well as child-centered play therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Dr. Perryman is child-centered. Yeah. She's very nice.
She's amazing. Yeah.
I really like her. And she works with Dr. David Christian, who was in my cohort and is really cool, does adventure-based stuff.
Yes.
He's from an Adlerian perspective, but it's worth having him on. I mean, obviously we, appreciate and all theoretical orientations. And he's just so fascinating listening to the way he engages with middle schoolers and high schoolers. And I think that's sometimes a space where it's kind of, we're not sure. Middle schoolers are hard.
They can be challenging. There's so much going on in middle school. I said that Kristie Perryman was at Oklahoma. She's in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Like that was not correct. So,
No.
uh, yeah, but a great slate to be honored at the APT conference in Houston in October. I believe the program will come out here shortly.
You're presenting, right,
I am
Kristie?
presenting. I am. I'm presenting on like supporting your community after a natural disaster with my colleague Rebecca Bird from Sacred Heart, who's also on our board of North Carolina APT. And Maggie, you are presenting.
Yes.
You've been wanting to present on for a while.
Yes, I think it's the fourth time we've submitted this proposal. And so it is with the research project that Kara Carnes Holt, Kristie Meany Wallen, and Courtney Glickman and I did on play therapy and motherhood, and how the roles kind of both entwine, like, and benefit and pull us away.
Such an important topic as the majority of our community are women, and
Mhm.
many have children and play both roles of play therapist and mother. And so I'm so
Yeah.
glad that APT is giving you guys the space to talk about it.
Yeah, I get to go the whole time, and I've never been to the award ceremony because I'm usually presenting earlier on in the week or have to go to the president's meeting. And so then I fly home to go, cart kids around to,
To be a mother.
yeah, to be a mom, to
Exactly
take
what you're
them to their
presenting
sports
on.
matches.
Yes.
And they really don't like it when I especially go to the play therapy conference. I have to kind of be vague as to where I'm going because they think that I'm just leaving to go play with other kids. Like, no,
No, I'm going to be with other adults.
I'm going to go play with my adult friends.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, everybody should come to Houston. So
Perfect.
anyway, yeah. So what do you think we should talk about today?
Well, we have had some inquiry about how do you manage questions
Yeah.
from kids in the play space. So I thought
Yeah.
maybe we could tackle questions.
Yeah. I think, and it goes kind of both ways. Like, what do you do when kids ask you questions? And also, how do we as play therapists try not to ask questions? Because that's kind of how we're taught to talk to kids, like socialize to talk to kids is to ask them questions.
Since they're, like the minute they get to move, we start killing them and interrogating them with questions. What color is this? What is this? What is the name of that? Dun, 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 dun. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think, almost get conditioned to think that's how conversation happens. You just question, answer, question, answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so easy to fall into that. And I know you and I have both spoken about how when we teach these classes, we usually put questions at the very end.
Yes.
And I get all this feedback, whether it's my own students or other students that have talked to my students, and they're like, you don't allow questions. You'll fail people if they ask questions. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I just point out how often we do use questions. Like, but
Yeah. Well, and I remember in Intro to Play, something that really stood out to me is typically if you're going to ask a question, we ask a question when we already have enough information to make a statement,
yeah,
right? So if we're asking, are you sad? Why, like, where did you get sad from?
right.
Like, what did the child do to indicate that they were sad or disappointed or happy or, whatever we're kind of asking the question? We got enough information to come to that conclusion to then ask a question. And I remember kind of the training of how do you rewrite that into a statement. So instead of, are you sad? You can say, you're sad.
Mm-hmm. And that's students really kind of their fear, I think, in that is that they're
Well, and the other problem with questions is kids have to think about it, right? So it
right
takes them out of play.
into
Uh,
their heads.
you'll see them pause for a minute or completely shift and not play and think about something. And so that's the other problem with asking questions is it really does shift the play that the child is engaging with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes them out of what they're doing, which is another thing that, we try and really work with our students and our supervisees about watching our reflections to make sure that they aren't taking the children out of the play. And so that is something that inherently they have to then stop and think about, which kind of defeats the purpose of what play therapy is, where it's the opportunity for them to play out their experiences as opposed to having to vocalize them or cognitively express them in a way that isn't as easy developmentally for them. And
Yeah.
so I don't think I've ever had a child, or I said, like, you're really sad right now. And they're like, oh, I have to be sad. I've had them tell me I'm wrong all the time. And sometimes I am wrong and sometimes I'm not,
Yes.
but
I
I
mean,
don't fight them on it.
mm, I think sometimes we maybe misjudge the feeling. And I see that happen a lot around anger or saying someone's angry or mad.
Mm-hmm,
That emotion in particular is tricky.
mm-hmm,
I've seen people write about it as more of a secondary emotion than a primary emotion, meaning that there's things that underline and the behavior is how we're deciding anger, but the emotion could be hurt, disappointment, shame, guilt. There's a whole bunch of different feelings that often
mm-hmm,
support the anger. And so when kids, that's where I see kids correcting the most, or I just have the intensity of the word wrong.
mm-hmm. And I think when we get it wrong, it's such a wonderful opportunity to say, oh, I made a mistake. Because then you're modeling that it's okay to make mistakes because we have such high levels of perfectionism and fear of like getting something wrong. And so when someone that they're in relationship with says like, oh, okay. And it's okay.
But I also think it conveys that message that I really want to understand you. I care a lot about you,
Mm-hmm,
so that I'm willing to shift how I'm experiencing us in this moment. And I have so much faith and trust in you that I'm willing to shift it. I don't have to be right.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes a different experience for kids in relationships with adults.
And I think it's also important too, because it gives you such information about the child when they say no or that you got it wrong. And you're like in my head, I might be making that like, I think that that is how you're feeling. But there's something about that feeling that doesn't feel okay for the child to feel. And so I'm not going to be like, I think you do. I'm just going to go, oh, okay. And then I internalize that and I process it after the session, like what is going on that this feels like such a not okay thing.
Yeah. Or when we see it enough, right? Like it might help us with our conceptualization about this child. Like,
Right.
what about this emotion or this awareness for the child is so threatening to them,
Mm-hmm.
unacceptable to them, or maybe the world around them, that maybe you're just not a kid who's allowed to be upset,
Mm-hmm.
to have strong emotional reactions.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make the feeling wrong, right? But I think that's how they internalize it. And so I can't present myself that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think even just in our society, the way we present different emotions, usually anger and frustration is red.
Mm,
And red means stop, red means alert, red means like,
problem.
yeah. And so inherently people, kids can interpret that of I can't be that way. That was actually something in my doc program. We had to do group therapy within our cohort. And that was one thing that the feedback I got was you don't let yourself be angry like
Mm,
in relationship. Like I can be angry like external, like with something that's like nebulous, but it's really hard. And it's those internalized messages of what does it mean to be a woman who is angry. And it was very interesting.
that is interesting.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
I
So
also,
back to this idea of asking kids questions.
yeah, yeah. I think that's what I was going to say. It's like another thing that questions does is that it like indicates to the child that this is what we're interested in.
Or the other thing that I've always heard is that we imply to kids they're really hard to understand. So
Oh,
like doing questioning to try to get to understanding. And so therefore the message we're constantly sending is you're hard to understand. So I have to like question you to figure out how and why you are the way you are, which is an interesting thought too. But
yeah. I had never thought about it that way. Like you're hard to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
I
I think which reinforces for some kids how they feel internally, or adults or
mhm.
adolescents, whoever we're talking with,
Like
that
I'm alone. No one can understand me.
if
There's
that's what
something
you're
wrong with
experiencing,
me.
and then you get questioned a lot in therapy, it just, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way that, gosh, I'm so hard to understand. Even these paid professionals can't understand me.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
ex
And I think sometimes I notice with novice counselors or, that questions feel safe. There's a safety in the question because they're in control and in some ways, right? Because they're controlling the conversation and what questions to ask. They don't necessarily have to touch on the emotional piece, which can feel really scary because when you go into those deeper emotions, it's it means that you have to be ready to experience, like have the child
Yeah.
process those emotions. And that can be really scary for some people.
Yeah, and I think that leans into what you said before about, it also puts you in the driver's seat when you're asking questions, right? Like it automatically puts you in control of the session.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the control away from the child.
Mm-hmm. And I
Yeah,
get those messages of like, these are the only things that matter. These are the things that are important. I need to, like, who this that's really bothering me isn't important, but this is what people care about.
yeah. I think the other thing it inadvertently conveys is that I'm not feeling very self-assured in this moment. I
Mm-hmm.
find that's a lot where my students are coming from, or early play therapists are coming from, is almost a lack of confidence in themselves to make statements.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also hard to get out of the habit of the inflection at the end. Even
Mhm.
if you're making the statement, like, you're really sad right now, like, you're really sad, as opposed to you're feeling really sad.
Even when you try to make a statement, it still comes out as a question based on where you're putting the intonation in your sentence.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, Maggie, when you are supervising, consulting, teaching, what kind of guidance do you give people who are stuck in question answer counseling approaches?
I
Sounds
mean,
early in the morning.
yeah, it's really, oh my God, I need some more coffee. I think a lot of times what I'll do in that moment is I'll try a role play
Hmm.
and I'll say, okay, so I want you, to be the client, and then I'll be the therapist. And I ask questions. And I'm like, okay, how did that feel? Safe, fine, insightful. And then I will then say, okay, I want you to be the same client and I will be the counselor and I don't ask any questions. And in my experience, usually it goes much deeper more quickly.
Yeah.
And some students are ready for that and some aren't. And then I try and also like if I have videos of them, what I'll do is like I'll pause, like they'll ask the question and then I'll pause it and I'll be like, okay, what do you notice? What was prompting you to ask this? What did you see? How, what's another way that you could do this? And then I also have a lot of things, I guess. I will just find YouTube videos. Like there's one of Mary Morrison Bennett, and of course there's ones with Gary Landreth, and I'll put them on mute and then I have them make the reflections based upon what they're seeing so that they start becoming more attuned to the nonverbals. What do you do?
I think it's a hard habit to break. And I acknowledge that first, that this is, we've all been conditioned to be question answer. So much so that even when we're passing people on the street, we ask them, how was your day? But we don't stop to get the answer. We just keep right. But we're so conditioned to
Mm-hmm.
engage with the questions. So first, I always acknowledge that, we've been swimming in a world where questions are our norm. And now I'm going to ask you to swim in a new pool where we try not to ask questions, which is just really hard to do. So in session, for me, the most important thing is to gain awareness of how often you're asking questions. And so I will often tell my students when I say, okay, you can't ask any more questions for this client, like forever, forever. Like that was your last questions that you could ask, right? And inevitably, they're going to ask a million questions the next time. And the first thing they say to me is, Dr. Obila, I asked so many questions. And I was like, oh, how many questions do you think you asked? And they're like, I think all of my responses were questions. I was like, so is that like five? Is that like 10? Like, how many were there? And they're like, no, it's like 100. And I was like, oh, so you asked a lot of questions. And I process with them, like, when did you know? When did you catch on that you were asking a lot of questions? And, sometimes it's not right away. It's like, well, it was about halfway through the session. Okay, so that is amazing, right?
Hmm.
So I don't dismiss or
Yeah.
what it is. I just say, I'm so glad you're gaining more awareness of when it's happening, right? We can't change behavior. Like the change cycle doesn't happen until you have awareness, and then you have to have intent to do it differently, right? So keep really being aware of when you're asking questions. And now I want you to switch to some more intention about what can you do differently, right? So that might be, and they hate transcripts, right? Because it's
Oh,
really
yeah.
labor intensive. But maybe it is writing down every time you ask a question. You don't have to transcribe it, but ask a question. And then I want you to write a statement next to it. And it really is, how do you process information? How do you learn? It's really important to think individually. It can't be universal for all students or all play therapists. And so then I'll say, now like, so this will be your first step into how do I change this mindset of always asking questions. And then we get to the point where it's happening much earlier and like it's heavier on questions, but we have intermittent statements. So then I encourage them to say, okay, so next time you have awareness, you've asked a question, just repeat a statement after it. So, are you sad? You're sad, right? So, like, now let's correct the language in the moment, and then we build off of that. And what we slowly see, and slow, I mean, over a few weeks, it's not, months or years, but typically what I see is students then changing to more statement oriented. So I don't try to fight the questions. I try to help them gain awareness and go in with the intention that I'm going to make more statements here.
Hmm.
And that has worked for a lot of my students. And again, it's how do you notice the most? What is your learning style? Is writing it down, is repeating it. I do encourage them to rewatch their video, pause it every time they ask a question, make it a statement. Take those moments to think about what you want to say. So that in session, you're not missing moments to make statements or to reword it. Like you
Yeah.
really have to outside a session. It's not going to come as natural in session because things happen way too fast in session.
Yeah.
Especially if you're pausing and thinking about, okay, now how do I make this into a statement?
Yeah. And
And so,
I asked them to try it in the real world.
mhm.
What does that look like? Or when you start watching TV or a movie, like starting to try and get that and just practicing it because I do think it's practice. It wasn't an easy switch for me. It took time.
And I still catch myself every once in a while asking a question over making a statement, but I'm so aware of it that like it's very apparent to me, like, why did I ask that in a question? Like in the moment, and I can
Mhm.
quickly
Pivot.
pivot. Hmm.
Mhm.
So, and I think the other part of this question is, like in the reciprocal relationship, right? Is the child asking you questions, and what do you do when a child is killing you with questions in the session, right? Or like interrogating you.
Yeah.
Role reversal.
Yeah. There's a lot of next time. We'll talk about that next time. Well, thank you, Kristie.
Thanks, Maggie.
It's always fun.
I know. Please go back and listen to some of our other podcasts. Also, I know we started with this, but if you have topics you want us to hit, or if there's certain ethical things that have come up for you,
Yeah.
you would like us to explore or discuss, we do want this podcast to be interactive. This is not just Maggie and I. I mean, we could talk about anything. So that's not a problem for us, but we want to make sure this is meaningful for you. So please send us your ideas. You can put a comment below this podcast, or you could also let us know on Facebook. Instagram, as well as to our emails, info@playtherapyspace.com, Maggie@playtherapy.com, or Kristie@playtherapy.com. We would love to hear from you. Let us know the topics that you want us to discuss.